Hi, everyone. Welcome to the next session. We're in the Dive into UK-CSA's manual. We're about to get started in about a minute, so if you're here for this session, you're in the right place. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to shut the door soon, so just want to give you a heads up. All right. Hi, everyone. Last session of the day. We're so excited you're here. My name is Katie Harvey. I am Oak's CSA Marketing and Outreach Program Manager, so very excited to be moderating this CSA-specific session. We are in with Kristi Durbin and Paul, and we are going to be doing the Dive into UK-CSA's Handbook, Utilizing and Developing Crop Production Resources. So I just have a few housekeeping notes before we get started. CEUs are available for extension agents or pesticide applicators. So we have those sign-up sheets at the registration table. So if that applies to you, you can sign up there at the end of this session. I distributed a few of those session feedback cards. So if you need to jet out early, feel free just to leave that where you are and I can collect it at the end. But the feedback's super important to Oak, so we really appreciate you completing those. And if you don't have one yet, don't worry, I'll be around to distribute those. And then we'll have a couple things going around the room. So this is a session specifically about a CSA production manual. So we have a couple hard copies for you all to look at. So we'll be passing those around. We just need those back at the end of the session. So look at it and then pass it to the next person. You can leave those in the back of the room and I'll collect them at the end. So those will be going around while we have our speakers. And then Kristi also has a sign up for its second edition that she'll talk about as well. So I'm going to take a moment just to give you some background on the speakers we have in the room today, and then I'm going to let them introduce themselves a little bit more. So we have with us Kristi Durbin. She is from University of Kentucky Organic Farming Unit. Kristi Durbin created and co-authored the HO 127 Community Supported Agriculture Production Manual of the Organic Farming Unit at the University of Kentucky. She has farmed at UK since 2012, managed the CSA project since 2016, and now teaches within UK's Department of Horticulture at the Martin Gatton College of Agriculture, Food and Environment. You can also follow the farm and what they're up to at UK-CSA. And then she's joined by Paul Merriweather. Paul Merriweather is from Ashbourne Farms. Paul grew up in Louisville, where a passion for farming took root early on. He was inspired by his grandparents' legacy, and after a career in food industry, Paul managed and embraced a new path post-COVID, joining Ashbourne Farms as a garden hand. His dedication led him to oversee mushroom production for several years, and he now proudly leads all organic production at Ashbourne Farms. He has a deep commitment to sustainable practices. Paul feels blessed to fulfill his lifelong dream of being a farmer and to be here with you today. So really excited to be joined by these two speakers. I'll be around. I'll be passing out those production manuals. Again, we want those back at the end of the session, so just leave them in the back of the house, and then I'll be around with those survey feedback cards as well. So excited to get started with you all. I'm going to pass it off to Kristi Durbin.
Thanks, Katie, and thank you all for being here. Last session of the day. Hopefully we still have a little bit of energy to prepare for our social annual meeting after this. So again, my name is Kristi Durbin. It's great to be here. I'm very humbled that a lot of people have been able to use this resource. So what I'm going to do today, though, is introduce you to the manual in case you're not familiar what this resource is, and kind of discuss what is in that and how you might use it, and then talk a little bit about that farm application bit, how you might think about applying it to your situation. So even if you're not a CSA producer, my hope is that you could glean something from today's session, because it is just relevant for anyone producing a horticultural crop that I'm going to talk about, like vegetables. And then after I talk a little bit about farm application, I'm going to invite Paul up here, and he's going to share kind of a testimonial and story of how they're utilizing it on their farm at Ashbourne. So excited to have his contributions as well, and we'll definitely have time for Q&A at the end. All right. So just a little background about our farm. The UK-CSA program was started in 2007. It has always been certified organic, the organic farming unit. We have 35 acres that are certified organic. And but initially when we started out with the CSA, and this was before I was even there, it's always been part of the educational programming. So we have a sustainable agriculture and community food systems program, and the CSA was an integral part of that, a living laboratory, so to speak, for the students. But it started on just a quarter acre, and we only had about 40 CSA members back in 2007. So education, huge piece of what we do. Extension, also a huge piece of what we do. And then we also have these community partnerships that are really valuable. And so I just want to mention that I am the third manager at the CSA at UK, and so I'm in a line of really excellent farmers and educators. We've always been a place that welcomes growers. We host a lot of field days. We partner with Oak and other groups to do that. Many of you may have been to our farm for such a field day. So that's something that I've gotten to participate in, help lead some of those tours. In addition to the CSA, we've also done a little bit of wholesale. We were GAP certified for a while, and so we've also gone through that process. But yeah, CSA generally has been our primary model for what we do. So during this time, I'd say from 2007 to the present, we've really worked on a systems approach, really thinking about how we do things, establishing SOPs, standard operating procedures, and really thinking about how we, defining the system, making it replicable, making it teachable for our students and for our staff. So I've been a part of that process, just kind of helping to tabulate that information, and this manual is sort of the culmination of some of that. So present day, our CSA is operating on about 10 to 12 acres. We have around 250 CSA members, and they join for 22 weeks from May through October. We also do a smaller fall CSA program for about 8 weeks. We do a Thanksgiving bulk box sale, and we have farm stands around 40 weeks out of the year where we sell just items a la carte. In terms of labor, right now we have around 10 seasonal workers or 5 full-time equivalent. So we don't have many year-round employees, but we do have a lot of seasonal staff who are both students and non-students. And currently I'm teaching 2 undergraduate classes at the University of Kentucky each year, and so those students are also a part of our system and help us out in the field and get to learn with a hands-on sort of immersive apprenticeship. And then the other exciting thing this year is we're launching the Kentucky Farm Launch, which is a beginning farmer training program. We're going to have our first cohort for that in 2025. We're really excited about that. So just lay of the land, that's kind of telling you a little bit about our farm. So the manual really has come out of my time at the CSA since 2012 and managing since 2016, but I'm really like building upon things that were already established prior to my management. So we have been documenting our system for a really long time, and so this tool was kind of seen as putting it all together, right? We've already had a lot of different tools put out there, but this was kind of trying to create one cohesive publication that was part of my master's work in order to, benchmark what are we doing, so something that other farmers could use as a benchmark. Up to this point, we were using as a benchmark things like resources out of Roxbury Farm in New York, and they're a great resource, but again, they're in New York, so we wanted something that was more specific to our zone here in Kentucky, and so that was what we were keen on. But also, in addition to that, we wanted something that would be useful for us internally, but also still relevant for you all, the growers, the producers, who could glean something from this, make it relevant to them, etc. So internal, but also being more extension focused. And I want to make a mention here that is a snapshot in time. So this was published in October of 2022. So obviously, we continue to evolve and make changes. So Katie mentioned we are planning to do a second edition. So I'm in the idea that this is a living document, right? So we did print one in 2022, but it is also digital, so that you can access it at all times online. But the idea here is that we would update it periodically, and that you could we could then make it a living document in that sense by editing it in real time. So if you are interested in a second edition printing, I do have a clipboard, and you can come at the end of the session just to give me your email, and I'd be happy to follow up with you if and when that time comes to possibly do that. And then lastly, it was wanting to be a teaching tool. So both institutionally, meaning like within the University of Kentucky, as I'm teaching undergraduate courses, I wanted the students to be able to have this tool as I teach, but also informally. As we're training our crew, as we're bringing on new employees, how do we acclimate them to our system? So that was kind of the goals. So what you're going to discover in the manual is different sections. There's a farming system, a crop handbook, there's a SOPs, workbooks, and an appendix. So I'm just going to briefly touch on what these are. So the first section is just kind of a production system overview. So we talk about our model, our CSA model, what that looks like, how we plan, things like rotation, mapping, developing your calendars. You'll see charts, you'll see pictures, you'll see things like this. This is a field preparation guidelines, how we think about timing for establishing new crops and going into a new field. So again, just different resources that you're going to see, trying to paint the picture, what our system looks like. We're going to go deeper into crop management in this system. So production, equipment, infrastructure, what our labor force looks like, what our CSA membership looks like, marketing, certifications, things like GAP, organic, and then beyond the farm gate, how we are working in the community. So this is just a broad stroke system overview. Like on the right-hand side, cover crops, that'd be like one topic, right? Where we talk about why we do cover crops, what that looks like, the equipment we're using with cover crops. So it's giving you just a summary of that. So the next section is really what I consider the meat of the handbook, which is the crop handbook, okay? So this is where I profiled, I had to count it, it was 34 different profiles for different crops. Now, some of them are individually treated, like in this example of eggplant. I'm just discussing eggplant in this profile. Some profiles might be a combination of multiple crops joined together. For example, turnips and rutabaga. We talk about turnips and rutabaga in the same profile, primarily because they are not managed much differently from one another, right? The similarities in how we manage those crops are quite about the same, so I just kind of group them together under the same profile. So even though there's only 34 profiles, there are probably closer to 40 actual crops that we discuss in the manual. So what you're going to discover in the crop handbook and on the profiles is just introducing the crop. We'll talk through varieties that we have used successfully. If it's a greenhouse produced crop, we'll talk about how we choose trays, transplant ages, things like that. And then field preparation, the fertility requirements of that crop, what we're doing, is it going into bare ground, are we growing it on plastic culture, all those information is there. Planting, seeding, whether that's transplanting or direct seeding, talk about crop spacing, timing, things like that. Then we go into another big section called cultural practices, which can be a lot of different things. It's a huge umbrella term for whether you think about pest and disease management, different unique considerations, cultural management practices like row covering or netting. Also, if you need to think about pollination or weeding or irrigation, what kind of issues do we find with this particular crop? How do we address those? And you'll also notice there's going to be pictures throughout, so some of them are pretty, some of them are fun, but hopefully a lot of them are just informative and illustrate our system well. And then in the crop handbook, we continue and talk about harvest. So what are our techniques for harvesting? What tools are we using to harvest that? And is there any kind of cleaning in the field that we're doing when we harvest it? And then yield is going to be based on some of our historical records dating back to 2015. So looking at what is our average yield on that crop on a per row foot basis. And then in this context of the CSA, how are we distributing it? So what would be the common frequency of giving this vegetable out? What would be a common quantity to give to our CSA members? And then the last piece on the crop profile would be this section on post-harvest handling. So how are we washing it, if we're washing it? Which wash lines in our pack shed are we utilizing? So what equipment? How are we sorting it? What's quality control look like? How are we tabulating our yield? Are we weighing? Are we counting? And how are we packing this? And then finally, storage. How is it going into storage? What was the expected shelf life of that crop? Okay, so that's the big middle section. Like I said, 34 different crop profiles with pictures and all that information. The next little section is going to be standard operating procedures. So I want to make a point here that these are very curated topics. This is not an exhaustive SOP section. We do have two different types of SOPs that I included. So the first type would be management considerations. And so I looked at SOPs for greenhouse management, irrigation management, harvest management, packing shed management, and like high tunnel management, all right? So looking at how, if you were to be a middle manager, you could give that to someone who's a middle manager, they would know kind of all the pieces of the puzzle to manage that segment of your farm, okay? But then the other section of SOPs would be just kind of specific nitty-gritty information about one topic. And I did include several on the greenhouse. And the reason for doing that was to sort of paint a picture for the reader that this is the first thing that we're training our employees on, right? They're starting in this time of year. One of the first things we're doing, we just did it this last week, green onions or onions in the greenhouse, right? We're seeding those. So training your employees in the greenhouse is one of the first things we're doing. So we're just trying to lay the land for you all. This is how we do it. This is how we train them. There's different components that are important for our greenhouse system. And so we start with those components to kind of set the stage for the rest of our system. But yeah, this is just kind of an example. In the SOPs, you're going to see they're numbered. They're going to be matched up with photos or charts that go align with those numbered instructions. And the idea is that they are concise and brief, so you can use it as a tool to refresh your memory or to train somebody else, okay? And then we have two downloadable workbooks. So in the physical manual, you'd have to follow the website to download them. On the digital copy, you can just click the link and it'll lead you to a downloadable version of these workbooks. The first one is a share and field workbook. So the idea here is helping you to plan for your season. So it has built-in formulas. So like in this snapshot of just a part of that worksheet, like the green cells are formulas, okay? And so anything in white you would update with your own information, your crop, your variety, when you want to harvest it, and then it would calculate things for you based on some standard values. And you can change those standard values. So like 300 row feet is our standard row feet in a field. You could change that for whatever field system you have. 275 is the share number we're using for the CSA. You could use a different share number to get a different yield, all right? But this is helping you to project what kind of amount of seed you need to buy, when you need to seed things in the greenhouse, when you need to plant it in the field in order to have it for when you want to harvest it, okay? So completely customizable as much as you want. And this is just one snapshot of one sheet. There are multiples, so you can actually use this tool to also build calendars to develop a schedule for when you field prep, when you need to seed things in your greenhouse, when you need to plant, etc. Okay, and then the second workbook is a fertility workbook. I'd say in the past 5 or so years, we've really tried to hone in our fertility. And you know, this is just a result of not wanting to over-fertilize when you start to see some crop issues from over-fertilization, but also from, you know, resource management and just trying to be conservative with how much we're spending on our inputs, for example. So we do plan fertility crop by crop. We look at the field it's going in. We take into account cover crops and the termination of those cover crops in order to determine credits we can give for the nitrogen from that organic matter. We also look at soil organic matter, SOM, and we look at compost applications in order to give credits for those as well. And then there's also a mineralization rate that changes. So we do give a credit for previous fertilizer applications because there is a percentage of mineralization that's going to happen in year 2 and year 3 after your initial cropping. So again, being able to do this is dependent upon having really good records, right? So this is going to help you keep those records. Again, formulas, completely customizable, helps you to track your fertility requirements. There's also a section that'll help you take into account fertigation. If you need to fertigate a crop mid-season during its growth cycle, you can also calculate that in order to apply your fertilizer. Okay. And then the appendices, there's things like a glossary, there's links to our YouTube channel. We have a Flickr site full of photos. I think there's like 28,000 photos on there. So we document our system. And then there's this other publication that the CSA manager before me, Tiffany Thompson, wrote, SR 111, which is an exhaustive economic analysis of our system. So again, just another great resource to check out that you could take advantage of. Okay, so that's just kind of the lay of the land of what's in the manual, what you can expect to see, which you could certainly just take your own time to dive into. I am going to talk a little bit now about just how we apply this into our system on farm and some of the things that have kind of percolated for us as a crew, for me as a manager, as we think about making these resources really accessible and thinking through your systems. Okay, so I would say that the manual is something that you could think about using just outright for your farm. It's something that you could think about adapting to your farm, and it's also something you could think about as using it as like a template or a guide in order to create your own resources or your own SOPs. So in this picture on the right, this is just like a snapshot of the tools in our tool room. They're all outlined. The idea of everything in place, right? Everything has a place, you have a system, and you want to train people so that it's consistent and it's reliable, right? If you know exactly where the tools are, you know where to go to get the tool, you know where to take it when you're done using the tool, there's no question, there's no looking, you're saving time, you're being efficient. So the idea here is about efficiency and how we train people to have consistent output. So first thing is, notice your farm rhythms and your systems. What are the things that everyone on the farm does on a regular basis, routine? How do you notice those things, take advantage of those things, pay attention, train those into your new employees? And then identifying critical pieces that might be unique to your operation. So you might read my manual that I wrote and like, this doesn't really apply to me, but what is it that you do instead that you would need to train somebody, okay? So thinking through what is unique, what equipment or what process is unique to your system that you do need to explain to somebody when they come in. And then you might identify problem areas, things where you have to keep going back, right? There's mistakes made, there's confusion. How do you address that problem area? So this is really simple, but just as an example, the tool's here hanging on a magnetic strip. So we used to just have people put their dirty tools in the sink, someone would wash them as a chore, and then they'd hang them on the magnetic strip. Well, then it starts rusting because they were wet when they put them on the magnetic strip. Seems really simple, but it's just one of those things that your process was not thorough, it was a problem. So we developed a dirty bin tote that was labeled dirty tools on the left, sink in the middle, and on the right, a labeled clean tool bin. And then the inset bin is actually a drain bin. So you put the tools in there after you clean them, they drip dry, then someone can hang them up on the magnetic strip, right? So just simple things. Now, do I need an SOP for that? Not really, right? I don't need to write this out to somebody. But you identify what is that piece that maybe was a problem, you develop a new system, and then you just simply train them. So again, just opening and thinking about those things that seem really silly or simple, but actually make a difference. Okay, so how might you think about writing your own SOPs? So if you were to develop your own farm's unique SOPs, what might you do to go about that? So one method would be written notes, right? Like taking actual physical notes, writing things down, planner, your phone, your notes app, something of that nature. You could do voice memos, digital notes, also forms. Big fan of Google Forms. I know I'm not the only one. Utilize forms to your advantage, okay? So you can record things, and then once you record things, you have it digitally, so you don't have to transfer it or search for it, right? Really makes it really nice. I'm also a huge fan of taking photos. I mean, our Flickr has 28,000 photos for a reason. I don't remember things. I need that picture to be my photographic memory, right? I need to look back and say, wait, how did we do this again? So I need those photos. They're really helpful for me, and I'm a visual person. Okay, so hanging here in this picture is an early iteration of an SOP for our greenhouse. You'll notice that it's hanging in front of our greenhouse trays, and it is in a ticket holder, which is one of those things you might see at like a car mechanic shop, but we use it because it's clear, and we can hang it with a magnetic hook and make it right where it needs to be. So make it really accessible. And then if you're writing them, here's another idea. Make it a part of your crew's job description to write the SOP. So great winter activity. You need to actually justify keeping people on in the off season. Have them help you create those resources, right? So have them write the SOP as they think it needs to be done, and it's going to teach you two things. First of all, it's going to save you time because you're not writing it from scratch. You're just editing it. Second, you're going to see, what did they miss? Where have I not been clear, right? So that's going to help you. Okay, and then placement. So this is kind of going into a lot of lean principles here, which I'm pretty big on. So visual, lean, again, just the idea of the ticket holder, having it where you need it. Again, things really make it obvious. Labels, tools have a place to go, they're labeled. This middle picture, all of our binders, all of our resources, our information, our maps, our schedules, they're all here, they're labeled. On the far right, this is like a hose reel. And there's a picture there showing that the hose nozzle needs to be off the floor. So we were noticing it was dragging on the floor. Again, simple, but it's a problem. Well, then I noticed that even if people rolled it up, the hose reel had a way of undoing itself, and the weight of that nozzle would just slowly creep that nozzle back down to the floor. So simply put a nail and I hung it. Now, the reason I'm including this photo is because the photo is now outdated. It's not actually showing you what you need to do. So again, you have to revise your SOPs. You have to go back and make sure that they're current to your system. Okay, love whiteboards are great. Make sure they don't get too cluttered with too much information. So we noticed we had one whiteboard, too much was happening there, so we decided we need more than one whiteboard. So whiteboards now on every single cooler so that we know exactly what's in there and we don't get confused, right? Putting resources where you need them. Again, this is kind of more lean stuff, but just thinking how you train people and that they have the resources at their fingertips. Posting the binder with all the information, that's on our cooler door. You can't miss it, it's right there. But then we noticed too, like everyone was asking, well, how do I store this crap? Does it go in this cooler or does it go in that cooler? Well, guess what? This was in the manual. Are they looking in the manual? I hope so, but if not, print it out, post it, make it easy. So we do like QR codes as well. So I have a QR code here for the manual so people can use that. So yeah, training your employees on your SOPs, making them accessible, incorporating it into your staff orientation, and then you can establish consistent output. If you're training them the same way from the get-go, you're going to have consistent output. And then solicit feedback from employees. They're going to tell you like what's confusing, what's not clear, what do I need to know more about. And then the big one is here, revise, refine, and review. So if you find a more efficient way to do something, then just revise your SOP, right? Or if you're going to start harvesting a crop, let's say you're entering tomato season. Tomatoes are starting, you know you're going to be harvesting them multiple times a week for like 14 straight weeks. It's a very regular thing. Everyone needs to know how to harvest tomatoes. Perfect time to pull out the manual and review. This is our harvest protocol. Or for you, reviewing whatever your harvest protocol is. And then if you're seeing repeated mistakes, that could mean one of two things again. It could be that there is something unclear and you need to refine it. Or maybe they just forgot and they weren't paying attention and reading it closely enough, so you need to review it. So again, there's a big piece here of how you train employees with those resources. And then, yeah, placement is huge. So I referenced this picture earlier, but that yellow industrial clipboard thing, you'll never guess what's inside. The manual. So the whole idea is that they can take that clipboard with them to the field. They have a question, someone else has a question, they get confused, flip right to it. And it's in a clipboard where it's not going to get damaged by the weather. The cabinet on the right is in our pack shed. a high traffic area, right? So what do we put on it? The QR code for the manual. They can scan that QR code and pull it up. It's a high traffic, high visibility area. They're gonna get the information they need. I just threw this in here as a good note that sometimes you're gonna need resources that are very, very site specific and farm specific. I did not include things like this in the manual. They are way too our farm specific, but really helpful. Having a little cheat sheet on how to build an irrigation manifold, laminate it, put it on a carabiner, make it easy for them to take to the field if they wanna know how to build this. On the right-hand side, how to grease your equipment. Where do you find all the grease points? Visual guides to do that, okay? These two things were created by staff. People on the crew, that was part of their job. They created these. Again, whiteboards are great. This is like our harvest in the pack shed. What else do we have? A QR code right next to the cooler whiteboard so they can scan that QR code and transfer it to the harvest log digitally so we have that record. So just creating those mechanisms for developing resources. All right, almost at the end here. This one was just something that was new for us. So again, getting a lot of questions. All right, do we use this supply or that supply? How do we pack this? How much weight here? You know, questions about that. What tools do we need? Do we need this knife or that knife? And again, I work with a lot of people who are new and students who need a lot of training. So I realized I could direct them to the manual and they could rifle through it to that specific crop and find that information, but I needed to make it a little bit more accessible. So I distilled a quick chart, a summary of all that information into one chart. So every crop, how we harvest it, what tools we're using, what supplies we need, how we're washing it, what bin we're packing it into, what pack supply we need, how we're recording it, and where we're storing it. So everything in one chart. Super easy. And guess what? Where's that gonna go? On the cabinet where everyone has to get their pack supplies. So they have a question, it's already right there. And I put it in multiple places because sometimes you need it in more than one spot. And then I realized this is great. It's posted, everyone can see it. What else can we do like this? Again, lean. Chore list. Put it right by our cleaning supplies. You need a chore? Well, now I'm putting it right where the shovel is hanging on the wall so you know exactly what chore you need to do and here's the tools to do it. So again, making things visual, making things accessible, putting it right in front of them, making their job easier. Because yes, I'd love for everyone to just walk around with their nose in a book. No, I don't. They gotta actually use this and make it relevant. So you might need to develop new tools for your farm, make it easy, create the cheat sheets. Okay, those are my tips. And now I'm gonna invite Paul up and let him take over and share a little bit about how he's using the manual on his farm.
Hey guys. Well, I'm Paul Merriweather from Ashbourne Farms. First of all, I want to thank Oak for putting on the session. And I really want to thank Kristi for writing this book. I mean, it's really been a template for the way we do things at our farm, and it's made farming so much easier for us. So it's a great resource. So I'm going to introduce myself, my crew, and a bit about our farm, and then I'm going to talk about how I use this manual, how I found this manual, and just how to implement it pretty easily. So yeah, this is us a few weeks ago. We went sledding after work at the farm. It's me on the left, Jake Cecil, my assistant, next to me. Shout out to him for helping me put this PowerPoint together. And then Monica, houseplant extraordinaire. Claire grows all our flowers. Emma does our mushroom production. And Jonna grows all our micros. And not pictured, but never forgotten, is Caden Eli, BCS extraordinaire. And Andrew Martin, who's pretty new with us, but he's doing a great job. So, yeah. None of us have a lot of experience with farming. It's something we all helped out in the gardens at home and stuff, but on the scale that we do it, it was very new to us and pretty intimidating to start off with. So yeah, here's our vision and mission statement. I'm not going to read those to you, but my interpretation of that for our farm is, as a business, we commit going the extra mile, putting in the extra hour to really have a great, not only just produce quality, but a great customer experience. And also the way we farm with nature, living in harmony with our environment, and then just creating educational opportunities and unique experiences for our customers. So Ashbourne Farms, who are we? 2,200 acres, it's pretty big. I haven't seen most of it. We do have, we do a lot of events. We have a beautiful event center called the Show Barn. We do weddings, concerts, corporate things like that. We have a lot of horses, equine events, row crops, which I'm going to convert to organic one day. And then, of course, our 6 acres, which we have in organic production. What do we grow? We grow vegetables, fruit, micros, herbs, mushrooms, flowers. We have bees for honey. We just started tapping maple trees for maple. We're planting an apple orchard this spring. So we try to do everything. We have cows for beef, chicken for eggs. What makes us unique, I think, is our farm store in Louisville. It's called the Haymarket. It's about as fresh a produce you can get in a brick and mortar. We do all of our harvest washing and packing the day before delivery. So outside of a farmer's market, I think that's about as fresh a produce as you're going to get. It's also really cool. Like, they have delicious pastries, an awesome coffee shop. They have a garden center in the back now where they sell garden supplies and put on gardening workshops. I think we have one coming up about just how to do bouquets in a nice, pleasing way. And it's a great place for families to go. It's a pretty cool place. And one thing we've started doing recently, and we're planning on doing a lot more over the next few years, is community outreach. So we have a very reasonably priced farm stand pickup at our farm every week. We donate a good amount of produce to our local pantry in LaGrange. We have a lot of field trips. Students come out. We teach them some of our gardening practices. I think Emma, our mushroom cultivator, even taught a homeschool co-op recently about how to grow mushrooms at home. And we've been doing a bit of community service lately. We work with some nonprofit gardens. So most recently, we worked with the hospital in LaGrange. They have a community garden where they donate a lot of their produce to their kitchen, so it feeds their patients. So we helped do a bit of planting and weeding, and I helped come up with a crop plan for them to get the best yield they could. So here's a few pictures. There's our Haymarket shelves. Most of that's our produce, but we also heavily feature Rootbound. Shout out Rootbound. Their stuff's awesome. Box of some random tomatoes. There's some of our mushrooms we grow, some blue oysters, looks like. Our pepper field from last year. Just a little visual of what we do. Who am I? Hi, I'm Paul. I'm the garden manager at Ashbourne Farms. I've worked my whole life as a food service manager up until COVID happened, and it became a miserable job. So took a step back, joined Ashbourne Farms as just a garden hand, helping plant, weed, do simple things like that. A year into that job, I became the mushroom cultivator, which was a lot of fun. I really dove headfirst into mushrooms and the weird fungus world, which was pretty cool. And then since Christmas 2023, I've been active garden manager. So you can kind of tell just from my work history, taking over 6 acres of organic production, I didn't have the best background for that. So I was really looking for a resource. So that's why I'm so excited to tell you all about the manual that Kristi made. A couple things about me. I have a daughter named Holly Blue with my girlfriend Brooke. And if you know me, you'll quickly find out that I love dragons and I love wearing Crocs. So, fun fact. So how did I find UK-CSA manual? So when I took over this job, I was confused. I didn't even know what questions to ask. I didn't know how to get started. We had just done all of our cover cropping, so I was weirdly obsessed with cover cropping. But that wasn't really what I should have been focusing on to start. So I was Googling things, and even when I did have the right question, I was getting a bunch of different answers. Even when I was trying to be specific to our climate zone, I was still getting 10 different ways of doing things and not too many proven results. So eventually, I reached out to the county extension office, and they were great. They gave me a lot of resources, but they also pointed me in the direction of oak. So I learned about Sarah Gerkink, shout out to her, who is the organic production specialist. If you are eligible for that resource, I would strongly recommend it. She came out to the farm a few times and really put together an awesome plan for us. Gave us lots of tips and tricks of how to farm and really helped me prioritize what I needed to work on. And she pointed me, she was like, the thing you really need to start doing is just start reading UK-CSA production manual. So it's like, what's that? Found it online. Looked pretty cool. Even when I had it though, I didn't really know how to start. So kind of just stepped back. I was like, what's the first thing you have to do for growing vegetables? Seeds, right? So started looking into the seeding section. And I'm going to have a few charts and graphs in here. They helped me out a lot, just trying to find a straight line to do things. So seeding, there's some things you direct seed, some things you transplant, and then even the things you transplant, there's some things like celery, peppers, tomatoes that you're going to pot up. So there's an awesome list of all the vegetables and the best way to do the seeding. And then even for the transplanting stuff, we had like 6 different tray cell sizes that we had at the farm. So luckily she had an awesome graph that told us exactly what size of tray cells to use for which vegetable. So seeding's taken care of. What's next? So planting, right? But before you plant, you have to do this field prep. So she had this chart earlier in the presentation, and it's awesome. It starts 6 to 8 weeks out before planting. Starts off with tillage, and then goes into some tarping, and then tilling again, and then irrigation, laying plastic. And even when you get into this, it's like, all right, I Google buying plastic. There's 3 different kinds of plastic to buy. So luckily, right next to this chart is a chart about what vegetables go into which kind of plastic. So I was like, great. Now we figured out which kind of plastic to grow what stuff in. So, and then there's lots of good info in here about harvesting and washing. I felt okay about harvesting and washing, so I'm not going to talk to you all too much about that. But storage, when we first took over, we were having a lot of problems storing vegetables. So found out lots of vegetables like to be stored at different temperatures. So now we have 3 different walk-ins at different temperatures, and it's drastically increased our shelf life and decreased our waste. So it's just proper storage. And another thing I found super helpful was just like the cold hardiness in high tunnels. So this is pretty much how I made the winter crop plan for this year. It tells you all the different crops you can grow in a high tunnel and what temperature outside it can get to, and the crops will still be okay in the high tunnel. So it's really cool. I had no idea you could grow all these crops year round and just keep on trucking through the winter. So that's been very helpful, just planning things out. There's a big section, lots of pictures about equipment. So equipment is probably my weakest point at the farm. It's confusing. I didn't do too much operating in the few years before I was the garden manager. So there's lots of information about the equipment, what to use it for, how to use it. And the other cool thing is we had some equipment at the farm that hadn't been touched in the few years that I had been there. So actually matching that equipment up to the book, and now we can utilize our field cultivator, our compost spreader, and our pull-behind tine weeder. So it's been great just like seeing what kind of equipment they use at the farm. And also like moving forward, if we're ever going to buy more equipment, I'm definitely going to go through her book and see what was most useful to them. And I would recommend everybody take a look at that equipment because there's some good stuff in there. One thing that gave me a lot of anxiety when I first took over was the weed and pest management. And talking to Kentucky farmers, I mean, that's a pretty common issue for everybody. But outside looking in, it's horrifying, the amount of weeds and pests that you have to deal with as a farmer. So one thing that was great about the pest management was the pest identification. So she has a whole chart about the most common different vegetables and the most common pests for each of those vegetables. So when I first tried to identify pests, I'd be looking at a tomato plant and just Googling what this insect looked like. And it was pretty hard to figure out from Google what this pest was. But if you narrow it down to these like 5 most common pests for tomatoes and then you search that way, it makes it a lot easier to identify it and then figure out the solution to that. It also talks a lot about integrated pest management. So we utilize green lacewing eggs pretty heavily now and lots of companion planting. Might have done too many marigolds in that house, but it looked pretty. And then just like staying on top of the weeds, so like learning about the thread stage weeds, tine weeding, and then trying to cultivate the soil before you even see the weeds. Just different ways to stay on top of these things that are big issues all the way around. This is one of my favorite things this book taught me. So teff, Ethiopian grass, germinates super fast. We got so many compliments over the year from tours that we did, just people complimenting the grass in our walking rows. It's fluffy, it's pretty. My crew weirdly likes walking barefoot in it. Feels good between your toes. So it's really cool, and it beats all the weeds. So as soon as you get it in the ground, it sprouts up pretty quick. So it's been great having that teff in there. So I was gonna talk you all through a vegetable. So this is the meat and bones of the book, like she said. So page 55, it tells you how to use it for the rest of the books. So I want to just go over onions. So the reason I picked onions, we had the biggest success with onions, and I think it's because we most closely followed the SOPs for onions in this book. There was a point in the middle of the season where I could take a picture of our onion row, and it looked almost identical to the picture in her book, and it was one of my proudest moments. It's like, I'm doing something right, thank God. So yeah, I just go through onions. So it talks about the varieties they use. So when I want to buy seeds, typically I want to buy like the longest storage onions. But according to them, it's not the best thing to grow in our climate. So it talks about the different varieties they use, which is Expression for their yellow, Sierra Blanca for their white, and Cabernet for their red. And then talks about the seeding. So they seed the onions in 162 trays, seed it in January, and it stays in the prop house for 14 weeks. They also did a cool thing that we didn't know about, cutting the top third off of the onions. So instead of the energy going up, it goes down, make nice root bulbs for planting. Yeah, and then field prep. Yeah. So it goes in aluminized plastic, thanks to that little chart. And anybody who's tried to work the field in spring, trying to work around rain, it's a nightmare. So what they do is they put all their plastic and fertilizer in the fall before that. That way it's all ready to go, and they don't have to try to work around the weather in the spring. 75 pounds of nitrogen per acre is recommended, and there's that little calculation earlier to show you how to get that amount of nitrogen. And then it's time to transplant. So they did 3 rows, 12 inches apart in the row, and they use their water wheel to plant. And it's so specific, it even tells you what speed they drag their water wheel through the fields at, 0.25 miles per hour, if you're wondering. And then it talks about the cultural practices, which is the most common pests and diseases that stuff deals with. So for onions, it was botrytis in the spring, which is just root rot. So what they do is they spray copper fungicide before heavy rain events to take care of that issue. And when to harvest. So you harvest when, harvest when 50 to 75% of the onions just flop over. You give them a little push with your fingers. We actually waited a little late. Our onions were flopping over by themselves, but they still turned out pretty good. Yeah, and then so after harvest, it's the storage. So, yield. So it talks about yield. It's pretty specific, 0.5 bulbs per row foot. So you can just do the math with how many row feet you have and multiply it by 0.5, and that's how many bulbs you're going to get. Also talks about how they harvest, using the plastic lifter to get under the plastic, and the onion bulbs just pop right out of the plastic. Makes it super easy to harvest. Post-harvest, they don't wash it. They cure it for 1 to 3 weeks. Same thing we did. And actually cut the tops of the onions about 1 finger width length away from the bulb for the curing. We do sell fresh onions if it's within a week, but everything that's going to be longer than a week is cured. And then once it's cured, it can store in room temperature, but storing it at 32 degrees will increase the storage life. And then if it gets to the point where you cure the onions and you're still not going to be able to sell them on time, it tells you can dry them and then ground them. Have a nice little onion powder that's going to last forever. So, and it does this for every crop. I mean, it's super specific. It's super easy to just follow along. It's verbiage that most people can understand. And if not, it talks about somewhere else in the book about what that is or how to do it. So, yeah, from someone who didn't really know what they were doing, just to have a book to go through, read about seeding, read about equipment, find each vegetable or fruit, and just go step by step by step by step. I mean, that was a game changer. Just having proper SOPs to already follow. So, I love this manual. That's all, folks.
Thanks, Paul. And I just want to give a shout out to co-authors on the publication, Dr. Mark Williams, Dr. Krista Jacobson, Dr. Rachel Rudolph. But anyways, if there are questions, I know we have a couple minutes, so Katie can come around if you have any questions. We're happy to answer. Sure. Thanks, Sierra.
That's right. Okay, perfect.
Katie.
I just feel so official with this headset.
Yeah, so the idea in my brain was every about 3 to 5 years that she was asking if there's about second edition. So my thought was about every 3 to 5 years, try to update it and add to it as relevant. So for example, I'm gonna try to develop a couple more profiles for other crops like strawberries, microgreens, and so hopefully I can add those in, maybe even add in a few more SOPs. So that's on my radar for about 2026. So if you would be interested in a printed copy, I do have a clipboard. You're welcome to come give me your email, and I just can keep you in the loop if that happens, or when that happens. But in the meantime, it will always be available digitally.
Do you want to put your name? Perfect. And then I've got, this mic is live now, so I can walk around. Does anyone else have a question? Do you have a question in the back? Nope.
Hi. With the like workbooks and forms and stuff that are available online, is there a tool that's like that you can like plug in your number of members or something like that, and kind of helps you work with the yields that you need and what you should be planting, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so the Share and Field Planner workbook is one of the 2 workbooks you can download. And so there's a yellow box where you input like your share number. So you can tailor that, customize that for your share number. And then your row feet, you'd want to change the row feet for your field size. And so again, you could do that and plan out as many crops as you want. Yield, you would input your own yield. So again, if you have yield numbers of your own, I would recommend you use your own yield numbers. But if you don't have a reference value, then I would say use what's in the manual, and then might just be a little conservative. I mean, you don't really know. We are pretty conservative with our yield numbers though. I mean, so just in terms of like thinking through crop loss and things of that nature. But yes, if you want to use those as benchmarks, that you could put in our yields in order to calculate.
Anyone else have a question? Here we go.
I know most of what you sell, I know most of what you sell is through CSA, but when you have surplus vegetables, how are they marketed?
We do a farm stand program, so it's the farm stand sales are at the exact same time as our CSA pickup. So we do a CSA pickup that's in person. So folks come and pick up either on the farm or on UK campus. And then we have an area where we can sell extras. So that's just kind of a way for us, again, to recoup for those extras, make it available for people if they want more of something. That's what we do with those. But yeah, we aren't really marketing much beyond the CSA.
You can also take comments.
Do you have like a guide of how to build the composition of each box so that you're giving people like a kind of a spread of different things? Or do you have any advice on like, do you want to give people a little bit of a lot of variety or less variety but more quantity, if that makes sense? And then kind of follow up, are you does like each box have a dollar value that you're trying to hit, and then you've like valued the different items in the box?
Yeah. We don't have dollar values, so like there is the SR 111 publication that is the economic analysis. Again, those numbers are from 2017, so you might need to think about adjusting those. But we don't have economics tied to this publication specifically. However, I do have crop mix, crop targets in terms of thinking about the CSA composition, and I talk through kind of how I plan for that, and that's both in the workbook, but also in the introduction to the manual, the production system overview. I talk about our sort of philosophy on how we approach that crop mix for our customers.
Thank you. When you actually are having customers come to you, is there any way that you're actually backfeeding the demographics of those people and what they're, I guess, comfortable with paying for each box and which size? And are you getting any feedback, I guess, from the customers to figure out what your actual market is for their price point?
Yeah, and so I will say that we are a very traditional CSA. So the farmers we decide what goes in the box and how much of every item. So we're not customizable like a lot of other programs are. We do offer a swap box, just very old school. We just kind of stuck to that model because our customers tend to like that particular model. They like the interface of talking to us in person. But we do generally do surveys, and in fact, I think last year was the first year I didn't do a survey, because I think, when you're 8 years in, you just kind of know your customers really well at that point, and you've already asked them over and over again. So I can kind of was able to reliably predict what they were gonna tell me feedback-wise. So as I've gone through that with them, I've kind of learned what they want, what they don't want, and so we've been able to take that into consideration. Yeah, but I recommend surveys if you're just starting out because it's good to hear from them. It's good to hear feedback from your members.
Here you go.
What do you pack your vegetables in?
Well, I guess we do market style, so they pick items. It's more of a shopping experience. Like they would pick their items out of our bins. But we do use like plastic bags to bag like loose greens, things like that, or like berry quarts, things like that. Of course, for smaller items like snap peas, strawberries. But overall, we try to reduce our materials input. So they have the shopping experience and they bring their own bags and select their own items. Yes, we have defined days of the week and hours. So,
when you guys decided to do the coolers to store all your vegetables and things of that nature, did you guys ever consider root cellars instead? And if so, why did you choose the cooler version over root cellar?
we did not consider root cellars. I think part of it was also just like our infrastructure at the UK farm and thinking too about mammalian pressure and things of that nature, wanting to be able to monitor for mice and things of that nature. So not looked into root cellars, but that's kind of why.
I can pass it, and then I'll pass the sign up if you'd like the second edition. But if it doesn't get back all the way back to the room, just come up to the front. So I'll leave it with you, and then yeah, absolutely. And does anyone have a question? Perfect. There we go.
So does this book touch on much with hydroponics, or have you personally done much experimentation or work with hydroponics?
Experimentation with, sorry, I missed that.
Oh, experimentation with hydroponics, if there's any hydroponics included in the manual.
No, unfortunately, we don't actually do much with hydroponics. Season extension with high tunnels, but just all in ground. Yep.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more question. Did anyone else have a question? We got it all. Question for Paul? Okay.
Okay. Do you have like specific survey questions that you'd recommend? Because I found like asking open-ended, like what veggies do you want to see more or less of? You get totally different answers. You know, some people want more of tomatoes, some people want no tomatoes. So.
You mean like in the context of a survey of your customers, right? Yeah, I mean, I've done it different ways. I've done like an open comment box of like, what would you like to see? Is there a crop that we're not growing that you're interested in? Can't guarantee I'll grow it, but sometimes I have started growing it because they asked for it. So there is that, but I've also kind of done a ranking system where I was like, how important is it for you to receive this or that? Because we were trying to determine, could we stop growing a couple things that were just really difficult? And when we realized how popular they were with people, it was like, okay, we can't do that. So it kind of helped inform like what the values were and priorities were for our members by having a kind of ranking of that nature. And then we did kind of ask them like a ranking of like, did you receive the right amount of this or the right frequency of this crop, or did you want it more, or did you want it less? So you could kind of do a kind of ranking system as well for that.
Awesome. We've got the clipboard kind of passing back. If you have the crop production manual, will you just maybe make sure I'm going to come find you and collect that. So I got one right here. Thank you. And then is the other one floating around? Can you raise your hand for me? The other menu. Oh, perfect. Okay. I just wanted to spot those. If you could, we are at time. So I want to give a big round of applause for Kristi and Paul. Thank you all so much. You can come find them after the session. If you didn't want to ask a question on the mic, totally understand. We have our pink survey cards, so just please leave those on your tables. I'll come collect them. If you don't have a survey card, I would love to give you one, so just maybe give me a wave and I can come get you a pink survey card. We really appreciate your feedback. We appreciate you being here. We've got a really fun social grow and gather, so if you RSVP'd for that, that's happening in this space. So stick around for that. You've got a GG on your badge. And just thank you all so much. We're so excited to wrap up the day with you. So awesome.